You are listening to the Spactastic Mysteries podcast. We are continuing Anna Gale Lyne's first novel in the Jaguar and Peacock series, Who Killed Ben? Federal agent and seasoned SpaceVessel Commander, Jessa Strazzer, emerges from the wreckage of a devastating accident that claimed the life of her beloved husband, Ben. Returning to her duties with a heavy heart, she grapples with grief and unanswered questions, determined to uncover the truth behind the tragedy that shattered her world. As Jessa sifts through the remnants of her past life, she stumbles upon a mysterious box of items left behind by Ben. Within its depths lies a chilling revelation: the accident that claimed Ben's life was no mere mishap, but a deliberate act of sabotage. This is Episode 9, Epidemic. If you have not subscribed, do so now, and if you are on YouTube, hit the bell to be notified of new episodes.
Rising to my feet, I took a deep breath and slipped my wedding ring off my finger. Unlatching the chain around my neck that held the locket, I slipped my ring on it. Then I refastened it around my neck. With Ben's ring on the chain, I could carry my memories of Ben close to my heart, just like he asked me to. "Do you think it's too soon?" I asked Nate as an afterthought. I held out my left hand to Nate, allowing him to slip his ring on my finger. He cradled my chin in his hands and answered, "It's not like we just met. We've known each other for 12 years. I playfully punched him in the arm. "You know what I mean. Is it too soon after?" Before he could answer, Reggie shuffled into the room. Dressed in her flannel pajamas with the feet in them, she held her teddy bear tightly to her chest. The obviously tired little girl approached me and complained, "Mommy, I don't feel good." As Reggie came closer, I noticed the beads of sweat glistening on her forehead and the redness of her cheeks. She burned under my touch. I instructed Nate, "Go into the facilities and get a wet washcloth. Make sure it is wet but not dripping." While he did that, I led Reggie over to the couch. I pressed my thumb to the center of my comlet. "Dr. Manning, this is Colonel Strazzer." "Is there a problem, Colonel?" the masculine voice of my android doctor inquired. His voice almost seemed to have concern in it. He hardly seemed like a machine at all. He sounded more like a human being, which was exactly what his creator intended, I suspected. "My daughter Regina's fever is spiking, doctor. I know you said it might do that. But I would feel better if I come to your quarters and check on her," he finished my thought. "You can never be too careful, Colonel. I will be there shortly." "Thank you, doctor." I pulled down the Afghan that hung on the back of the couch, spreading it over Reggie's arms and legs. "Dr. Manning is coming over to make you all better," I whispered, sitting down beside her on the couch. I prayed under my breath that Reggie would be all right. Nate knelt down beside her and placed the washcloth on her forehead. When he realized how feverish she was, his eyes widened in alarm. "Sweetie, do you want me to bring you some water or juice?" he offered, patting her arm. "Could you bring me a glass of orange juice in my teddy bear cup?" the girl questioned in a hoarse, strained voice. Nate marched over to the kitchen, then turned around to look at me for further instruction. "Top right cabinet above the sink," I notified him, smiling to myself for a brief second before remembering Reggie's fever. A few minutes later, a knock came at the door. "It is Dr. Manning," a voice from the other side of the door announced. "Come in, doctor," I called toward the door, turning the washcloth over. The doors slid open, revealing the honey blonde doctor. His medical kit in tow. "Oh yes, now I see that our patient is resting quite comfortably, holding her favorite friend," Dr. Manning observed. I rose to my feet, moving out of the doctor's way. "Now, Ms. Masters, I thought you told me that you were going to get better." The doctor sat down beside Reggie, giving her a brilliant smile. "Besides this nasty fever of yours, Ms. Masters, where does it hurt?" While Dr. Manning and Reggie discussed where it hurt, I joined Nate in the kitchen. "Something's not right," I admitted for the first time to Nate, and to myself. "I can feel it." "I know." He took me in his arms and hugged me. "Don't worry. She'll make it through this." Reggie's strong-willed. "She got that from you." Colonel Strazzer, Dr. Manning called out to me. Nate grabbed the cup of orange juice that he had set on the counter, leading me out to the living room. How many people have been exposed to Regina today? The doctor demanded. An urgency in his voice. I exchanged glances with Nate. I rested my elbow in the palm of my other hand, putting my fist under my chin. Her Aunt Joey, Major Masters, you and me, I answered, trying to keep my voice steady for Reggie's sake. No one outside these quarters, Doctor. And that is the way it must stay, the doctor insisted, taking his stethoscope out of his ears, letting it rest around his neck. He led us out of Reggie's earshot. I had originally thought it was a simple case of the flu, Colonel, but her symptoms are rapidly turning into something much worse. What is it? I required, swallowing dryly. My pulse quickened. I felt as if my knees were going to buckle under me. She has RY 987 fever. It is highly contagious for the first 72 hours, Colonel. The doctor caught my eye. Although she has had this for 12 or more hours, I am going to quarantine all of you for a full 72 hours to be on the safe side. Except me, Colonel, no one will be able to come or go from these quarters for that amount of time. Can this RY 987 fever be cured? Nate inquired, putting his arm around me. He pulled me close to him. Fortunately, Regina has a mild case of the fever, and with around-the-clock treatment for the next week, she will return to healthy self, the doctor advised us. Turning to leave, he added, I've given Regina her medication and will be back to check on her every 4 hours. In the meantime, give her plenty of love and liquids. With that, he marched out the door. Looking at Nate and then Reggie, I declared, I guess Uncle Nate will be staying with us for a few days. After my daughter's excited, yeah, I sank into the nearest chair and plotted my next move. With my hair still slightly damp and outfitted in my woodland camouflage fatigues, I sat at the dining room table. I tried to concentrate on the passage of scripture I was reading in my old, black leather Bible. My great-grandmother passed it on to my grandmother. My grandmother passed it on to my mother. My mother passed it on to me. Every time I tried to read Isaiah 53, my mind either wandered to Nate, who was sleeping so peacefully on the couch in the corner of the room, or to Reggie's illness. Was it really a coincidence that Reggie came down with RY 987 fever? I wondered to myself as I sipped my wine glass filled with orange juice. Ben used to serve me breakfast in bed when we were home together. He always poured my orange juice into a wine glass. I continued the tradition even when we were apart because somehow it made me feel closer to him. I spied Joey crossing from the hallway to the living room. Good morning, I greeted her in a hushed tone. I put my finger to my mouth, motioning my head toward the couch. Some of us are still sleeping, Joey. I still don't know why he slept on the couch when we have a guest room he could have used. Joey sank down in the chair next to me. I guess we are all grounded for a few days, Joey whispered. I know that must be hard for you most of all, Jessa. I mean with everything that's going on. Her voice trailed off when she caught sight of the ring on my finger. She grabbed my hand and scrutinized the ring for a moment. Who's the guy? Joey prompted with a gleeful smile on her face, scooting her chair closer to me as if we were sharing secrets about who asked whom to the high school prom. What's his name, Jessa? Is he cute? Joey, I scolded, going into the kitchen to grab the pitcher of orange juice and another wine glass. When I returned, I continued, you're married. But, Jessa, I am not dead. Joey poured herself a glass of juice. So who is he, Jessa? I glanced over at Nate, then back at Joey. Joey blinked in surprise, covering her face with her hands. But I could still see the smile on her face as bright as the sun. She folded her hands under her chin and expressed, it's Nate. Joey threw her arms around my neck. It's Nate. Oh, Jessa, that's wonderful. After removing her arms from me, Joey sat back in her chair. She crossed her arms against her chest, studying my expression. You think that it is too soon, Jessa, don't you? Isn't it, Joey? Joey sat there for a few minutes, giving me a long look. She ran her tongue over her teeth, then remarked, "I guess that would depend on how you feel about Nate. Do you love him? I don't mean like a brother-in-law or a partner, but are you in love with him? I can't stop thinking about him. My heart quickens when he is around. My knees get weak. It started a couple of months ago, and I felt so guilty," I told Joey, refilling my glass. "I love him, Joey, and I want to marry him. But am I disgracing Ben in the process? Did you stop loving Ben because you fell in love with Nate?" Joey asked in a gentle voice, touching my hand. "No, Joey. I still love Ben very much." Joey slowly nodded. "So how can you be disgracing Ben if you still love him?" Joey questioned rhetorically. "Ben would want you to be happy, Jessa. And if marrying Nate makes you happy, he wouldn't want you to be sitting around feeling guilty about it." "I guess you're right, Joey." "I know I'm right, Jessa," Joey told me, sipping her orange juice. She moved her tongue into her cheek. She looked as if she couldn't decide whether or not to let me in on a secret. "How can you be so sure, Joey?" "Because before Ben died, just a few weeks before, he and I were talking about the future. Jessa, he told me that if he died, he hoped you would remarry and that Nate would eventually settle down." She smiled and started laughing as she remembered the conversation. "He said, I know that my wife doesn't have any romantic feelings for Nate now, but maybe she could learn to love him like she does me," Joey recounted. Tears moved down my cheeks. Ben would have understood, I said to myself. I wasted a lot of precious time and energy beating myself up over my feelings for Nate. I spent all that time denying that I loved Nate. All to protect Ben. But Ben didn't need protecting, not from me or Nate and my love. Ben understood. He even wanted me and Nate to love each other. Joey wiped my tears with her thumbs. "Jess, I didn't know telling you that story would make you cry." "I am glad you told me, Joey," I told her, catching her eye. "There's no need for me to feel guilty anymore, Joey." I smiled through my tears. "I am glad too," a masculine voice chimed in. Joey and I immediately turned toward the source of the voice. Nate, still dressed in his clothes from last night, sat straight up on the couch. He swung his legs around to the edge and pulled himself up. "I have been feeling guilty too. I mean, like I was stealing my brother's wife," he confessed, walking over to the table. "Did he really say that, Joey?" He sat down in the chair on the other side of me. "Yeah," Joey answered, looking her brother up and down. "You know, big brother, Colin keeps some of his clothes here for the times when the Liberty and the Roosevelt rendezvous." She finished her juice. "If you wanted to take a shower or something, I don't think he would mind if you borrow some of his clothes for the next few days, Nate. They might be a little big on you, but..." "I wasn't too sure about that guy you married, little sister, but today, I'm grateful," Nate replied, then kissed her on the cheek. "I'll be back in a while, girls." He flashed me a smile, showing just the right amount of teeth. After Nate showered and donned Colin's jeans and a black sweatshirt, he disappeared into the kitchen. I checked on Reggie. "Joey's in there reading to her." "Has Dr. Manning come by yet?" he called out to me. "He just left." I stared at the small screen I held in my hand. On the screen, the events occurring in Command Central played. I could hear every order given, witness every person's reactions, and be present while still quarantined in my quarters. I could watch the crew with or without their knowledge. I could even interact with the crew, if I needed to. All at the touch of a button. Nate returned from the kitchen with a platter of fruit: sliced apples, oranges, bananas, strawberries, watermelon and grapes, and bagels. Setting it on the table next to the half-filled pitcher of orange juice, he walked over to me. He slipped his arms around my neck. "What's this?" he asked, touching the small screen. "It looks like Command Central." I smiled, holding up a long black device, which looked similar to a 21st century television remote control called the Overseer. "With this, I can touch a button and see what is going on in Command Central or any other place on this vessel." I looked at him. Graham had it installed before we returned to the Liberty. Nate rolled his eyes upward. A gift for the workaholic in you, Nate observed sarcastically. He took the remote away from me and snapped it off. Come on, it's time to eat something. He sat down in the chair next to me. We bowed our heads and prayed. I couldn't get Reggie's fever off my mind. Reggie's exposure to the RY-987 fever and the biological weapon were connected. I was sure of it. I tossed and turned all night thinking about how Reggie contracted the fever. I concluded that someone deliberately exposed Reggie to it. But who? It was something Natasha would do, but she was in a holding cell. But what if Natasha had someone working with her? Someone aboard the Liberty? Peacock, Nate called my name sharply. His voice broke my train of thought. My eyes met his. I'm sorry, what were you saying? Okay, what is on your mind? He posed, reaching his hand up to push a strand of hair out of my eyes. His hand lingered there for a moment as he studied my face. No, let me guess, you think that my niece, your daughter, is sick in there because someone deliberately exposed her to the RY-987 fever, he interjected before I could utter a word. He gestured toward Reggie's room. I inspected his expression for a few seconds, extending my hand up to meet his. You've been thinking the same thing, Jag, I perceived. I recognized that she's right, but I don't want to admit it. Look in his eyes. I leaned in and gently kissed his lips. He returned my kiss before he admitted, I think it's too much of a coincidence. I've come to the conclusion that Natasha has an ally aboard this star vessel. Someone that's working with her, Jag. I moved my hand away from Nate's and snatched a triangle-shaped watermelon slice from the tray, then bit into it. The question is who? Your logic as usual is impeccable, Nate commended, grabbing a bagel. I have some ideas of who. Suddenly a scream came from Reggie's room. Joey. We ran down the hallway and into the room. Joey sat in a chair, slumped over. Reggie's favorite book, Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, fell off her lap and onto the floor. Sweat dripped from Joey's long, dark tresses. I put my fingers to Joey's neck. I detected a pulse. Sighing deeply, I tapped my comlet 3 times, indicating a medical emergency. Looking over at Nate, I asked, can you carry Joey into her room, please? Nate nodded. A few minutes later, the doctor arrived. He confirmed that Joey had contracted the RY-987 fever. After Dr. Manning injected her with the same medication he had been giving Reggie, Joey came to. 2 down and 2 to go, I told Nate as the doctor walked out the door. Nate drew me into his arms, holding me closely, as we watched Joey fall back to sleep.